Ade, stop! Is it a falling tree?
Stay inside. I'm backing up. We're taking the long way.
Out of the car! All of you, out of the car! Please, take everything. Take the car.
Daniel!
Shut up, woman!
Daddy, Mommy, Daddy, help me!
Rain in Lagos did not merely fall. It fell with a brutal, relentless weight that turned asphalt into dark rivers and choked the air with the scent of damp earth and exhaust fumes. Inside the Mercedes sedan, however, the world was warm and safe. Chief Adeyemi kept both hands firmly on the steering wheel, his knuckles pale against the leather. Beside him, his wife, Bose, was calmly listening to a program going on low on the radio, her head resting against the headrest. In the back seat, 8-year-old Daniel was chattering away, his bright voice cutting through the rhythmic sloshing of the windshield wipers. "Daddy, will Uncle Tun be at the house when we get back?" Daniel asked, leaning forward against his seatbelt, clutching a small plastic toy figure. "He promised he would bring me those comic books from London." Adeyemi glanced at his son in the rearview mirror, his eyes softening. Daniel was the center of their universe, a precocious, dimpled boy whose quick intelligence and polite demeanor had made him the darling of their entire estate in Ikeja. "Uncle Tun might be late, son," Adeyemi said, his voice deep and reassuring. "He had some business to finalize for the company downtown. But you know your uncle never forgets a promise to his favorite nephew." "I'm his only nephew," Daniel declared proudly, swinging his small legs. Bose laughed, turning around to ruffle Daniel's neatly combed hair. "Listen to him. So full of himself. Put your shoes back on, Daniel. We'll be home in 20 minutes. Daniel dutifully reached down to slip his feet back into his shiny black school shoes, carefully adjusting the straps. He checked his wrist, admiring the small, blue digital watch his father had bought him for his 8th birthday just 2 weeks prior. To Daniel, that watch was a badge of manhood. They turned off the main expressway onto the stretch of road known locally as the Forest Bypass, a dark, lonely corridor bordered by dense thickets of wild bamboo and uncompleted concrete structures. It was a route Adeyemi usually avoided after dark, but the heavy downpour had flooded the main junction, forcing his hand. Suddenly, the headlights illuminated something lying across the narrow road. "Ade, stop!" Bose gasped, sitting up straight. A thick palm trunk blocked the lane. Adeyemi slammed on the brakes. The tires shrieked against the wet bitumen, bringing the car to a halt just feet away from the timber. "Is it a fallen tree?" Bose asked, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. "Stay inside," Adeyemi said, shifting into reverse. "I'm backing up. We're taking the long way." Before his foot could press the accelerator, a sharp crack shattered the silence. The rear driver's side window erupted inward, showering the cabin with tempered glass. Bose screamed. Daniel shrieked in terror. "Out of the car! All of you! Out of the car!" Broad, harsh voices bellowed into the night. Dark figures clad in raincoats and wearing grease paint across their faces materialized from the blackness of the bush like phantoms. Long barrels glinted under the dim interior light of the sedan. "Please, take everything. Take the car." Adeyemi raised his hands, his voice trembling as he scrambled out of the driver's door, desperate to show compliance. "Don't hurt my family." Bose was pulled roughly from the passenger seat, falling onto her knees in the mud. "Daniel! Daniel!" she screamed frantically, reaching back into the dark interior. "Shut up, woman!" a tall man barked, shoving her back down. In the blinding chaos of shouting, thunder, and torrential rain, the rear door was yanked open. A large hand reached into the back seat, grabbing Daniel by his arm. "Daddy! Mommy!" the boy sobbed, his small fingers kicking frantically against the seat. "Daddy, help me!" "Daniel!" Adeyemi lunged forward, but a heavy blow from the butt of a shotgun struck him across the temple. The world spun, and he fell face first into the cold water swelling in the gutter. Blood mixed with rainwater poured into his eyes, blurring his vision. Through the haze of pain and the deafening roar of the storm, Adeyemi heard his wife's hysterical shrieks echo down the lonely highway, followed by the sound of boots splashing rapidly away into the dark, dense foliage of the forest. When Adeyemi managed to push himself up, wiping the blood from his eyes, the highway was empty. The robbers were gone. The car doors swung open in the rain, and Daniel was nowhere to be found. For 7 agonizing days, the forest along the bypass was transformed into a search ground. Police sirens wailed continuously, their red and blue lights cutting through the fog of early mornings. Local hunters with long Dane guns, neighborhood volunteers, and frantic relatives searched every ditch, every abandoned structure, and every muddy ravine within a 10-mile radius. Chief Adeyemi did not sleep. With a thick bandage wrapped around his head, he walked through the thorn bushes until his clothes were shredded and his hands bled. Beside him, his younger brother, Tund, was a pillar of strength, coordinating the search parties, feeding the police officers, and holding a weeping Bose whenever her knees gave out. "We will find him, brother," Tund would whisper, his hand resting heavily on Adeyemi's trembling shoulder, his eyes filled with sorrow. "We will bring Daniel home." On the 8th morning, a phone call shattered the fragile hope holding the family together. A commercial bus had crashed and caught fire on the interstate highway, 40 kilometers away. In the burnt rubber and ash near the wreckage, local authorities had discovered the charred remains of a small child. The fire had been devastating. The body was burned entirely beyond recognition. Adeyemi and Tund drove to the state mortuary in silence. The room smelled of chemicals and damp concrete. When the medical examiner pulled back the white sheet, Adeyemi turned his face away, a choked sob tearing from his throat. I cannot look," Adeyemi gasped, clutching his chest as if his heart were physically tearing apart. Tund stepped forward, his face solemn, his hands steady. He pointed quietly to the items laid out on a stainless steel tray beside the slab. Items retrieved from the victim that had somehow survived the periphery of the blaze. A small pair of black school shoes with silver buckles, scorched at the heels. A torn piece of navy blue school trousers. And a melted, blue digital wristwatch, its strap singed, but its small metal backing undeniably familiar. "It's him, Ade," Tund choked out, his voice cracking as he looked away, burying his face in his hands. "God help us, it's Daniel." The news broke the community. The bright, laughter-filled boy who used to run through the corridors of the estate was gone. At the funeral, the casket was kept closed. Bose had to be sedated by doctors. She could not stand on her own 2 feet as the small wooden box was lowered into the dark soil of the cemetery. Chief Adeyemi stood like a wooden pillar, staring blankly at the grave. He did not cry. Something inside him had died instead. What nobody in that grief-stricken crowd never knew was that the charred remains lying deep beneath the earth did not belong to Daniel Adeyemi. The clothes, the shoes, and the blue wristwatch had been meticulously stripped from an innocent 8-year-old boy in the back of a dark van miles away, then planted on the corpse of an unclaimed run-over street child by a man who stood quietly at the funeral, shedding bitter tears into a white handkerchief. Thousands of miles across the Atlantic, in a quiet, leafy suburb of London, a young man sat at a large mahogany desk, surrounded by cardboard boxes. His name was Julian Vance. To the world, he was a brilliant 26-year-old architectural draftsperson, soft-spoken and contemplative. He had spent his life under the comfortable, protective wing of Arthur and Eleanor Vance, a wealthy, childless British-Nigerian couple who had given him everything a child could dream of: private schooling, warmth, and unyielding love. Arthur Vance had passed away 3 weeks prior after a long battle with cancer. Eleanor had passed 4 years earlier. Julian was left alone in the vast, quiet house, tasked with sorting through his adoptive father's legal papers and personal effects. Julian leaned back, rubbing his aching eyes. He reached into a rusted steel lockbox he had forced open with a screwdriver. Inside were old land deeds, foreign bank statements, and a faded yellow folder tied with a cloth ribbon. He untied the ribbon and unfolded the documents inside. The top document was his British naturalization paper. Below it was a Nigerian birth certificate bearing the name Julian Vance, issued in Lagos 26 years ago. Julian frowned. He adjusted the desk lamp, bringing the paper closer. The birth certificate looked crisp, but the seal looked subtly altered. More strangely, attached to the back was a carbon copy of a hospital delivery record from a clinic in Ibadan, dated 3 months after the birth date listed on his official citizenship papers. Below the birth certificate lay a handwritten receipt on yellowed paper, dated October 1998, the exact month and year he had supposedly been adopted as an infant. The writing was crude. received the sum of $15,000 for logistics and processing regarding the boy. Final exchange completed at Cotonou border. Julian's breath hitched in his throat. His blood ran cold. Logistics? Exchange? He dug deeper into the box. At the very bottom lay a small, clear plastic bag that had been tucked behind the lining. Inside was a tiny, tarnished silver ring, a child's ring, engraved with two tiny letters, D.A. Julian held the ring in his palm, his hands trembling violently. D.A., he whispered to the empty room. He remembered nothing before the age of 8. His father, Arthur, had always told him that he had been involved in a terrible childhood fever in Nigeria that wiped his early memories before they brought him to England. He had trusted that narrative his entire life. Arthur and Eleanor had been devoted, gentle parents. They had never treated him with anything less than unconditional adoration. Had they bought him? The realization hit his stomach like a lead weight. His loving parents, were they buyers in a human market? Driven by a desperate, terrifying need for truth, Julian spent the next 6 months consumed by a private investigation. He hired a discreet private investigator in Lagos, sending scanned copies of the documents and a sample of his own DNA to an international genealogy clinic that specialized in West African heritage tracing. Months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and agonizing waiting. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the investigator called. Mr. Vance. The investigator's voice was tense over the international line. The DNA markers you provided. We ran them against a private registry used by families seeking lost relatives from the late 90s. We found a partial match on a regional database, which led us to an old police missing persons file. Julian held his breath, his knuckles white around the phone. And the DNA matches a maternal sample deposited 15 years ago by a woman named Daniel Adeyemi, the investigator said softly. Mr. Vance, your biological name is Daniel Adeyemi. You were reported kidnapped 18 years ago. But there is a complication. What complication? As far as the law, the press, and your parents are concerned, you died 18 years ago. You are buried in a cemetery in Ikeja. The house in the quiet suburb of Ikeja was a ghost of its former glory. The grand iron gates were rusted at the hinges. The once lush garden was overgrown with stubborn weeds. Chief Adeyemi's business empire had collapsed years ago, eroded by his own hollowed despair and the quiet, systemic embezzlement orchestrated by his trusted younger brother, Tond. Bose lived like a recluse, sitting on the veranda for hours, staring blankly at the driveway, her mind trapped forever in that rainy night in 1998. When a taxi pulled up outside the gate, the rusted hinges creaked loudly. Julian, now knowing himself to be Daniel, stepped out onto the cracked pavement. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the familiar pitch of the roofline, a phantom spark of memory leaping in the dark corners of his mind. A swing set that used to sit in the yard, the smell of fried plantains coming from the kitchen. He walked up the steps and knocked on the faded wooden door. An elderly woman opened it. Her hair was entirely white, her face etched with deep lines of sorrow. It was Bose. Daniel's throat seized. Mom? He whispered, the long-forgotten word tumbling instinctively from his lips. Bose froze, her dark eyes narrowing as she looked at the young man standing on her porch. He was tall, dressed in a sharp Western coat, his face bearing an unmistakable, haunting resemblance to her husband in his youth. Who are you? She asked, her voice raspy, cautious. Mom. It's me, Daniel said, tears welling in his eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver ring, holding it out with a shaking hand. It's Daniel. I didn't die in that fire. I was taken. Bose stared at the ring, then looked up at his face. For a second, a flash of wild, brilliant hope flared in her eyes. But then, a dark, heavy wall of defense slammed shut behind her expression. Get out, she whispered, stepping back. Mom, please listen to me. I have DNA results. I have papers. Get out. Bose screamed, her voice cracking into a desperate shriek that echoed down the quiet street. How dare you? How dare you come here with these lies? My son is dead. I buried him 18 years ago. I put his body in the ground. Neighbors began to open their doors, peering over walls. A group of men from the local estate security committee approached the gate, their expressions hostile. What is happening here? one of the neighbors yelled. Young man, leave this woman alone. Is it not enough that this family has suffered? You want to come and play games to scam them out of what little they have left. I'm not a scammer, Daniel shouted, tears spilling down his cheeks as he backed away from the advancing crowd. Look at my face. Look at me. We have seen many fraudsters like you, a neighbor shouted, pushing him toward the gate. Wicked boy, trying to torment an old, grieving mother for money. Go away before we call the police. From the doorway, Bose wept hysterically, holding her head in her hands as her husband, Adeyemi, now an old, broken man leaning on a cane, hurried out to hold her. Adeyemi glared at Daniel with a mixture of profound agony and fiery rage, waving his cane threateningly. Leave my house, Adeyemi bellowed, his voice trembling. Leave us to our grief. Daniel stood in the middle of the dusty street as the heavy iron gates slammed shut in his face. The cold rejection cut deeper than any physical blade. Daniel did not leave Nigeria. He checked into a small, modest hotel in Maryland, Ikeja, his heart heavy with a mixture of rejection and burning determination. He knew he could not simply demand love from parents who had spent nearly 2 decades mourning a corpse. He needed undeniable, unassailable truth. His presence in Lagos, however, had sent a shockwave through the dark underbelly of the city. In a luxurious high-rise office in Victoria Island, Chief Tunde Adeyemi sat behind a glass desk, staring at a photograph sent to his phone by a contact in the estate. His face was pale, a fine sheen of sweat glistening on his forehead. It cannot be him, Tunde muttered to himself, his fingers digging into the leather arms of his chair. The boy was sent across the border 18 years ago. The paper trail was burned. Tunde grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in nearly a decade. Find out where he is staying. Tunde hissed into the receiver the moment the call connected. He has documents. He has DNA tests. I don't care how you do it. Get those files, destroy them, and make sure this imposter disappears back to Europe. If my brother finds out, if the police get involved, we are all finished. That night, Daniel's hotel room was ransacked while he was out meeting with his private investigator. His laptop was stolen, his travel bag slashed to ribbons, and his original DNA documents taken. When Daniel returned to the ruined room, he realized the terrifying scale of the force aligned against him. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a battle for survival. Someone wanted Daniel Adeyemi to stay dead. The next morning, Daniel received an unexpected phone call. Mr. Daniel, a gravelly, aged voice spoke through the speaker. Who is this? Daniel asked cautiously, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed. My name is Inspector Samuel Okon. Retired, the man said. I was the lead officer on your kidnapping case in 1998. I heard what happened at Chief Adeyemi's house yesterday. The neighbors are talking. The estate is buzzing. Daniel's breath caught. Inspector, do you believe I'm an imposter too? A long pause hung on the line. I never believed that body in the morgue was yours, Okon said softly. The clothes matched, yes. The watch matched, but the timeline was wrong. The burns were too convenient. My superiors closed the file because pressure was applied from above. High up, I kept my private case notes in my garage for 18 years. Meet me at the old police college grounds in 1 hour. Come alone. An hour later, Daniel met Inspector Okon, a silver-haired man with sharp, intelligent eyes, sitting on a wooden bench under the shade of a massive mahogany tree. Okon laid out a thick, weathered cardboard folder on the bench between them. When you vanished, Okon began, tapping the folder. Your father's business was generating millions. His younger brother, Tunde, was deep in debt from bad offshore gambling debts. If your father died, the company went to you, managed by a trust. But if you were dead, and your father's spirit was broken, Tunde would take over as sole administrator. Daniel felt a sickening twist in his gut. Uncle Tunde, the highway robbery was staged, Okon said flatly. The robbers weren't after money. They were hired to extract you. The syndicate that took you was led by a woman known as Mama Kodanu, a notorious child trafficker. They didn't kill children. They sold them to wealthy foreign buyers looking for illegal adoptions. But to keep your father from searching forever, Tunde needed a body. Okon opened the folder, revealing faded black and white crime scene photos. Tunde bought a corpse from a hospital morgue. a poor street child who had been hit by a lorry. He dressed the poor dead child in your spare school clothes, which he took from your house while your parents were searching the woods. He put your watch on the corpse's wrist, burned the vehicle, and found the body himself. Daniel stared at the photographs, horror drying his throat. My own uncle. Tund paid off my senior commander to suppress my doubts. Okon continued, his voice heavy with old regret. I was forced into early retirement when I raised questions, but I kept the original forensic manifests. And more importantly, I know where Mama Kodanu's old right-hand man lives. He is old, sick, and dying of kidney failure in a hospice in Badagry. He wants to clear his conscience before he meets his maker. The parlor of the Adeyemi residence was suffocatingly quiet. Chief Adeyemi sat in his armchair, his face buried in his hands. Bose sat beside him, weeping softly, her eyes swollen. Standing by the window, sipping a glass of whiskey, was Tund. You must put a restraining order on that boy, brother, Tund said smoothly, turning around with a look of deep concern. He is a dangerous con man. He broke into your heart, tried to reopen old wounds just to squeeze money out of you. I have already instructed my lawyers to handle him. Before Adeyemi could answer, the front gates exploded inward with a sharp metallic clatter. Two heavy police vehicles swept into the driveway, their red and blue lights flashing frantically through the living room windows. Armed officers stepped out, surrounding the perimeter. What is the meaning of this? Tund demanded, his glass dropping to the thick carpet as he rushed to the door. The front door swung open. Inspector Okon walked in first, his posture straight, holding a thick yellow envelope. Behind him walked two senior officers from the State Criminal Investigation Department. And behind them stepped Daniel. Get out of this house, Tund roared, pointing a shaking finger at Daniel. Officers, arrest this man. He is harassing my family. Silence, Chief Tund, the senior police officer barked, stepping into the center of the room. No one moves. Chief Adeyemi stood up slowly, leaning heavily on his cane, his eyes darting wildly between Okon, Tund, and Daniel. Inspector Okon, what is going on here? Inspector Okon stepped forward and placed the heavy envelope on the central coffee table. 18 years ago, Chief Adeyemi, a crime of unimaginable cruelty was committed against your house, Okon said, his voice echoing in the still room. And the man who planned it is standing right beside you. Lies, Tund shouted, his voice pitching high with panic. This old man is senile. He's working with this fraudster. We have the official confession of Pa Ojo, signed 2 hours ago in Badagry. The senior officer interrupted calmly, pulling out a recorded document. He detailed the payment of 5 million naira made to his syndicate in October 1998 by Chief Tund Adeyemi to kidnap Daniel Adeyemi. Bose gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She looked at Tund, horror dawning in her eyes. Tund, we also have bank transfer statements from an offshore account in Cotonou, linked directly to Tund Adeyemi's firm, paying for forged adoption papers, Okon added. And finally, we have a fresh DNA sample, drawn under official police supervision this morning at the General Hospital, matched against the blood sample you kept in storage, Chief Adeyemi, when Daniel was born. The senior officer opened a white sheet of paper and read aloud. Probability of maternity, 99.99%. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The room fell into an absolute, agonizing silence. Tund backed away toward the window, his eyes wild, his chest heaving. It was for the family business. You were ruining everything, Ade. You were going to give everything to a child while the company went under. I saved us. You stole my boy. Bose's voice was a whisper, trembling with a sudden, devastating fury. She stood up, her entire body shaking. You watched me cry for 18 years? You held my hand at a grave? You buried another person's child and told me it was my son. Bose charged forward with a guttural scream, hurling herself at Tund, her nails clawing at his face before the police officers quickly intervened, pulling her back and pinning Tund against the wall. Handcuffs clicked loudly around Tund's wrists. The proud, wealthy businessman collapsed into a sobbing, pathetic heap as the officers dragged him out toward the waiting police cars. His wealth, his influence, and the carefully constructed lie he had lived for 2 decades dissolved in a single, terrifying instant. In the center of the parlor, Chief Adeyemi dropped his cane. It clattered loudly against the tiled floor. He looked at Daniel. Really looked at him. He saw the slight tilt of his own jaw, the shape of Bose's eyes, the small scar near his eyebrow from a childhood fall off a porch chair. "Daniel?" Adeyemi whispered, his knees buckling. Daniel stepped forward and caught his father before he could hit the floor. Bose fell upon them both, her arms wrapping fiercely around Daniel's neck, her deep, agonizing sobs turning into wild tears of joy. She pulled his face close, kissing his cheeks, his forehead, his hands, as if trying to wash away 18 years of grief with her tears. "My boy, my baby. God forgive me, my son." Bose wept, holding him so tightly Daniel could barely breathe. "You came back to me. My boy came home." Daniel rested his head against his mother's shoulder, closing his eyes as the wall of pain inside him finally crumbled into warm, healing tears. The afternoon sun was soft, casting long, golden shadows across the quiet grounds of the Acacia Memorial Cemetery. The birds sang in the high branches of the trees overhead. The air was still, washed clean by a gentle morning breeze. Standing before a small plot of land was Daniel, flanked by Chief Adeyemi and Bose. Where a faded, cracked headstone bearing the name Daniel Adeyemi, 1990 to 1998, had stood for nearly 2 decades, there was now a fresh, polished slab of white marble. Workers had just finished setting the new stone into the earth. Daniel stepped forward, kneeling beside the smooth, white marble. He ran his fingers over the freshly carved gold lettering. It did not bear his name anymore. The new inscription read, "In loving memory of an unknown child, known only to God, but forever remembered by this family. Rest in eternal dignity." Daniel stood up slowly, looking at the quiet grave. His mother reached out, taking his right hand, while his father took his left. Tund was now serving a 30-year sentence in a maximum security prison, stripped of every asset he had ever stolen. Daniel had refused to press further civil suits or seek personal revenge against his uncle's lingering assets, choosing instead to focus all his energy on restoring his father's broken health and helping rebuild the family estate. Daniel looked down at the marble slab one last time, a gentle, peaceful smile touching his lips. "You buried my name," Daniel said quietly into the warm afternoon wind, his voice steady and filled with grace. "But God preserved my life." Beside him, Bose bowed her head in a silent prayer of gratitude, while Chief Adeyemi squeezed his son's hand tightly, knowing that though 18 years had been stolen in darkness, the light had finally brought their boy back home. If you find this story meaningful, kindly like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories updates. Also, what lesson did you learn from this story? We would like to know in the comments. Thank you for watching.